Hi, I'm Bob Lee. I'm a former U.S. Navy aviator, and I had duty during World War II in the Pacific. That was over 60 years ago, of course. But I'm remembering some of the things that happened during that period of time. Just today I found this aviator's flight logbook that includes every flight that I have as a naval cadet and also as a lieutenant junior grade. We flew over in the Pacific, and this thing I remember most is near the end of the war. We were flying these Coronado aircraft. This was a 4-engine seaplane. We landed on the water, and we could take off from the water because we were flying into locations where they yet hadn't had any airstrip. So we were able, in the islands, for example, to go into the lagoons and to have the anchorages where the ships could be our floating hotels. Some of the things that I remember particularly are the visits that we had from the remnants of the Japanese near the end of the war. They were obviously losing the war, but weren't willing to quit until the atomic bomb fell, of course. But before that time, they were making life miserable for us at Okinawa by kamikaze flights. I remember very well one night that the general quarters alarm went off all over the harbor that had a big fleet of ships in that harbor. There were, I think, hundreds of ships there, and every ship had a general quarters alarm. We pilots who flew during the day were also awakened, of course, and wondering what was going on, and we didn't have any battle stations aboard that ship because it was simply hosting us. So we went up on the deck, and there it was like the worst 4th of July fireworks display you've ever seen or heard, and we were finding that the whole sky lit up with pyrotechnics, you might say, and terrible noise. And it was a strange sensation to be there and to be a witness for this without having any job to do. We pilots had our job to do the next day, but at night not. It was a very frightening occasion. But the kamikazes were relentless in their holding on to try to destroy the American forces before they could invade Japan. This was in August, I think, of 1945. And I remember one day we were aboard ship having our luncheon in the officers' mess. It was a mess. And they, all of a sudden we heard this tremendous explosion right outside. And then it was followed by another explosion. And so we rushed out onto the deck. And there we saw the remains of a plane that had crashed into our ship, with the remains of the pilot and the remains of the plane still there. And then we figured out that what happened was that this Kazakami plane had flown low to avoid the radar and had just come over the thing and aimed for the one ship that they could see, which was ours. And I would not be here telling you this today if the gunner hadn't been alert and saw this plane coming in, knew it was an enemy plane going to hit the ship, and he shot it and detonated the bomb before it could hit our plane and destroy us all. So that's one of the experiences I remember very well. And then I remember also the experience of being ordered to fly into the eye of a typhoon, like in this country, we don't have the typhoons, but we have the equivalent, of course. And what happened was that we were given orders to plot the location of the typhoon that was moving toward the Philippines. We were in the anchorage for the fleet at Ulithi. Ulithi being a big island with a large atoll in which hundreds of ships from the United States fleet could be. And we were asked to go and plot where that typhoon was, where it was going, how fast it was going. And I discovered later that it had only been done once before by anybody in our squadron and very few others. Nowadays, of course, they have the satellites that will take care of those things, but then we didn't. So we had to decide where this typhoon was and where it was going and how fast. And there's never been a flight like that in my experience, and I've been in many flights that have had a great deal of jumping around and tossing and turning and whatnot. We were in the cockpit and busy every second of the time, of course, and so we couldn't bother with too much of that. But we did try. The question was, should we let the autopilot handle it, or should we try to control the weather? Well, we did a little of each. And then when we got suddenly a very big surprise, although we knew about it in advance, but still it was a surprise. We came out and the sky was clear and the sun was shining. And of course then we realized that we were in the core, in the inner circle of the surrounding winds of this typhoon. And we noticed that they were counterclockwise. We were only 10 degrees north of the equator, but if we'd been south of the equator, they would have been clockwise winds. I never knew that before, but I discovered it. And then we quickly had to go down to the level of the water, read the airspeed indicator to the atmospheric pressure, and I looked out the window to decide what should be the report that we would radio back to the Navy headquarters of the speed of the wind. It was very difficult to figure out. We'd been taught how to estimate it, but the wind was worse than we'd ever been called upon to estimate. So I think it was 40, 50 miles an hour right within that core, within the eye of the typhoon. And it was only about 25 miles in diameter. And we were soon out of it, and then we were back into the turbulence of the day. But it reminded me of the fact that part of the enemy that we faced during World War II was the weather as well as the Japanese. Ultimately, I think the weather won. Talk to you later.